Shalom, Yahweh Hashem Yahushua Barakatah for the brothers, Yahweh Shema Alathah Hashem Yahushua for the sisters. This is the Victorville Friday High Desert Scripture Breakdown class. I'm Police Officer Shadow Rock. Tonight we're going to go into part 3 of what should blacks and Hispanics separate from America. Now, earlier in what I spoke about in the other classes was about this new kind of slavery that they had. There was a new slavery after, we left those slave ships and went on plantations. Blacks and Hispanics were in bondage back then. Afterwards, they had what was called forced labor. Now, I spoke about forced labor. I went into some details into what happened to some of the people that were forced into slavery. They were actually told, blacks were told that they were singled out and told that they had a debt to pay to a certain individual, a man. And this man took them and forced him to work on his plantation. Well, I would say his farm. Okay, for argument's sake. I'm gonna go into, I know I went back, so I'm gonna do a little recap on this. I'm gonna go to, for a period of 80 years between the Civil War and World War I, blacks weren't truly free. See, that's the period between Civil War, World War I. They weren't slaves either. They were forced to labor with work against their will. Okay. White Southerners, because this happened in the South, white Southerners were trying to put them as close to slavery as possible. The old South could not be the new South and prosper without blacks, which means without free labor, which the blacks provided them. Power, force, and brutality was what they used. Okay. Now, I'm gonna go into kind of skip forward because I did have this class already in the beginning. The end of Reconstruction, the nature of crime and punishment in the South changed dramatically. The nature of crime and punishment. State after state and county after county made new laws that targeted blacks, effectively criminalized black life. See, so they targeted blacks. They made these new laws after slavery, and they targeted blacks. Okay, it was a crime to walk beside the railroad if you were a farm worker. So you can't even walk behind, by the railroad. Okay, as ridiculous as it sounds, and it was ridiculous. Okay, it was unnecessary, but these are the laws that these white Southerners made against our people. This is the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge under the Commander General Yohana, and we do our research and study these facts and things about our history and how they pertain to scriptures. Okay, it was a crime to sell products of your farm after dark. So you can't sell after dark. What's the reason behind it? If somebody wants to buy something, at 8 p.m., you can't do it in the South. That was a law. Okay, one of the new laws. It was a crime to speak loudly in the company of white women. It was a crime. Okay, speak loudly in the company of white women. What was that about? That's our characteristics as Negroes, so-called Negroes. We speak loudly. We speak loudly today, 2021, wherever we go. It doesn't really mean nothing. It just that's how we express ourselves. But here they made it a crime. You understand? So spitting or drinking or drunk public or loitering could put blacks in confinement. See, there was an over exaggeration of black criminality. Okay, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, they were previously misdemeanors, and now in these states they were felony offenses. So they pumped them up into felonies, over exaggeration of crimes. It's just ridiculous, man. Okay. In Tennessee, stealing an 8-cent fence rail, a fence rail that you use to board up your fences, and it costs 8 cents a piece. Okay. Brought hard labor, which brought you, like, I guess, a year or whatever of hard labor. Mostly damaging of these laws was vagrancy. Vagrancy was one of the biggest damaging factor against blacks and our people, blacks and Hispanics, because vagrancy is by definition, it's the fact that you don't have a job and you're hanging around somewhere, and they find you don't have no work. Well, hell, that's always been the case with us. We always didn't have work at time to time, more often than not. So vagrancy was the most damaging, because then you're going to be confined, you're going to be convicted, and they're going to force you to do their work, and they don't pay you. Okay. If you couldn't prove that you're employed under slavery, blacks was most punished by slave holders of crime, but now only 10% arrested in the South were white. Well, we know that whites were committing these crimes as well. Okay. This is what brought about the agricultural, the progress of agriculture in America. We were responsible for building it up so it became a world economy, agriculture, world economy, because we were out there working in them fields. We were out there working in the mines, doing mining as well. Okay. Let's go. I'm gonna go up here. For their labor in states, they began charging fees, renting a prisoner to companies. So the prisoner got rented to a company. Okay. Monthly, the highest rates were for the strongest workers and the longest sentences. The 13th Amendment says slavery was abolished, except as a punishment of crime, which makes slavery extended, but by punishment of another name. So that your slavery is extended because of they're giving you these exaggerated crimes and convicting you of these things, and they're making you and forcing you to go into labor for them. The system was known as convict leasing. Call it convict leasing, like you lease a car. Okay. Alabama earned $14,000 in their first year of convict leasing in 1874. In 1890, it was roughly estimated that $164,000 was earned. Okay, that's what started it out. Roughly 4.1 million by then. Other states, Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Arkansas, Louisiana, Florida, Texas. It's like the whole South. They were making money, and a lot of it. 4.1 million. Okay. They leased convicts to private industry, and they were given tremendous discretionary powers. And that was another, how would you say it? Another perk for them to be able to beat you. And this means that they could beat you, whip you, and even kill you. Okay. If they felt if they just felt like it, they might've got up on the wrong side of the morning and just felt like they should just whoop you to death, or just whoop you, and sometimes often they would get killed. Okay. So the discretionary power to the private owner to do as he pleases to the convict. In 1884, there was a brother that said, "We as convicts is something like a man drowning." Okay. We have been convicted of felonies, and because of that, we lost everything on earth. That's how he felt. Okay. And that's how a lot of other convicts felt as well. In 1884, a series of letters was written to Alabama, to the new inspector, and, new inspector of prison from Alabama coal mines, in the coal mines in Alabama. They were called the Pratt coal mines. Okay. Ezekiel Archie was a 25-year-old convict. He said, all these years of how we suffered, we looked death in the face. We worked hungry, thirsty, and half clothed and sore. Okay. Now, I'm going to fast forward it up to, fast forward this up a little bit because this is part 3. We're going to go into some of these other conditions that happened back then. Okay. All across the region, let's see. In the creation of chain gangs were that of Southerners all across the region were frustrated that the roads of the South were the most dangerous and terrible roads in America. See, and that had an impact because a lot of people would lose a lot of those farmers and slave owners. I mean, you know, former slave owners and stuff who were using what was called peonage to inflict false labor upon blacks and Hispanics. They lost a lot of their stuff out in the field while they were riding through those roads. They lost a lot of their crop, a lot of their crop of what they were growing on their farms because the roads were so dangerous, unimaginable, and terrible roads is how they said it in America. The economy can grow unmanageably. Crops were lost in the field because the roads were so terrible. The conditions for chain gang roads, as they were for the convict lease prisoners, they were subject to the same modes of brutality and the same standards of meager health and shelter. They couldn't even get good health care or shelter. You know, they were really rough. And this was a terrible part of slavery that America doesn't tell you right off the bat, or they don't even tell you, period. You know, how they suffer, how the blacks were suffering behind being trumped up charges and being included in forced labor, which is really called peonage. America was outlawed peonage, but they really didn't outlaw peonage. They were actually practicing this. Okay. And it was under very, very terrible conditions. You know, like I said, healthcare and shelter was few and far between. Okay. Let's see. The modes of brutality and some standards of meager health shelter was, as well as clothing, food. Chain gangs continued deep into the 20th century. The roads of the South were the most terrible and unimaginable roads in America. Crops were lost in the fields because they were so terrible. The conditions of chain gang prisoners were equally horrific as they were for the convict lease prisoners. They were subject to the same modes of brutality, the same beatings, the same meager health care and shelter, clothing, food. Chain gangs continued. Okay. Sharecroppers agreed to a percentage of the profits, but had to take out loans in order to survive and in order to bring crops in yearly. 50 to 70 and 90% interest weren't uncommon. They would charge that interest. Sharecroppers' basic necessities needed through the year so that the system placed blacks in a position where upward mobility is essentially impossible for them. No upward mobility. Okay. Sharecropping also engulfed growing numbers of whites, including immigrants. Without legal or political rights, black sharecroppers were especially vulnerable. See, so they didn't have political rights, no legal backing, or nothing like that. Millions of blacks in remote parts of the South couldn't leave the farms they were held on. They were held on these farms, but they couldn't leave. If they did, they were subject to arrest by the sheriff. And if they were arrested, they would then be returned to the very same farms of oftentimes in chains, receiving nothing. They return to the farms and they oftentimes bring them back in chains. Man, that's terrible. That's horrible. That's horrific. Sharecropping, Salaki, is not slavery, but it did become, for an enormous population of people, forced labor. Families stayed intact, probably in a 2-mile radius of where they were born. Mothers, fathers, sons, grandparents, everybody stayed. If you knew by the mere fact of leaving exposed you to the dangers of being caught up in this system, it made you stay. So it was like, damn if I do and damn if I don't. You know, it's going to happen to me anyway. That's how they felt about it. And, you know, oftentimes that's what it was. Okay. You knew what would happen if you stepped off. In 1921, this is one of the people that were in forced labor. In 1921, I grew up in Monticello, Georgia. My parental grandmother was the daughter of John S. Williams. Okay, now wait, this is one of the descendants of the former slaveholders and the people that enforced the peonage. Okay. I heard from my uncles, this is a female, but she said his name is her uncle. She's the daughter of John S. Williams. I heard from my uncles, from my father, that he was a wonderful man, respected in the community. They always said these good things about themselves, which is really false. In 1921, almost 18 years after the peonage trials, federal investigators visited the Williams farms to follow up on the reports that he was holding peonage. There was a group of black men in the field, terrified. John Williams suddenly appears and acts like he didn't know. So he playing it off. He playing like he don't know, you know. No, like he didn't know this was against the law. He act like he didn't even know this was against the law. Okay. His intentions were good and he'll do better. That's what he was saying. And the federal investigators leave, but Williams doesn't know what they were going to do. He talks to his foreman, Clyde Manning, and says, as the court transcript says, we've got to do any with these boys. Says we've got to do any with these, but it doesn't make sense. But the Williams family, the Williams family story was that he worked prisoners on his farm. See, that was the story that, you know, they knew that he was working prisoners on his farm. They said they were hardened criminals and that they were put in the penitentiary for a long time. And one night, a lot of prisoners tried to escape. Williams, along with other farmers who were working, these men tracked them down, and in the process of recapturing them, killed some of them. They killed some of them in the process of recapturing them. Williams and his foreman Manning killed 11 workers. Some were bludgeoned to death. You know, when we bludgeon, you're getting hit in the head with a blunt object, like it cracked your skull, like they did Rodney King. Okay, they cracked Rodney King's skull, I think in 9 places. So they were doing the same thing. History actually repeats itself. So others were weighted down with chains and forced into a nearby river. Another was made, so they drowned up. Another was made to dig his own grave. Okay. Williams' descendant said they did it in the most horrific ways that she couldn't even talk about it. Not only that they were murdered, but the cruelty in the way that it was carried out. Okay. So these type of things were done. See, we're the descendants of Jacob. They're the descendants of Esau. Okay. I'm gonna go to let's see, Obadiah chapter 1 and verse 10. The book of Obadiah chapter 1 and verse 10. See. Okay. Obadiah chapter 1 and verse 10, and it reads, For thy violence against thy brother Jacob. Jacob is the father of blacks, Hispanics, and so-called Native Americans. Okay. For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. And who is he talking about? You're going to be cut off forever. This is the pride of thy heart. You go up to verse 3, you'll see the pride of thine heart hath made thee, thou that dwelleth in the clefts of the rocks. Who lives in the cleft of the rocks? The cleft of the rocks are the holes in the mountains. Okay. We know that Caucasians are from the Caucasus Mountains. They originated in caves. That's a fact. Okay. Thou that dwelleth in the clefts of rocks, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down? Though thou exalt thyself, in verse 4, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest upon the stars. What's the symbol of America? The eagle. What's the symbol of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines? The eagle. Okay. And though thou set thy nest among the stars. So you have to know who these scriptures are talking about. You set the nest upon the stars. They're starting a space force right now. 2 millionaires just came back from the, or tried to get to the moon. And one, I think, went to the moon. And then one, I think that he just got out of the Earth's atmosphere or whatever. But they were millionaires, and that's their dream. And they are looking at Mars and seeing how they can, try to make civilization in Mars. They set their nests among the stars. That's the Most High God's home. You're not going to stay up there like that. The Most High is going to see to it, because he says in Scripture, it tells us, whose habitation is high, it says, who shall bring me down? Okay. Verse 4, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence I will bring thee down, saith the Lord. You're not going to stay up in his house. You're going to stay up in space and all of that. The Lord said he's going to bring you down. Okay. And this is, want to know who we're talking about? Go to verse 6. It says, how are the things of Esau, who is the father of the so-called white man? Okay. How are things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up? Okay. This is against Esau. And verse 8 says, shall I not in that day, saith the Lord, even destroy the wise men out of Edom? Because Esau is Edom. Okay. And understanding out of the mount of Esau. See? And so that's who is this book of Obadiah is condemning Esau. Throughout the Bible, it condemns Esau. It speaks about, the Bible describes the wars between Esau and Israel. Really, the wars between Esau and Jacob. Jacob's name was changed to Israel. Okay. So we need to know why. What we're reading right now, the brutality, okay, the brutality of Esau, okay, using peonage and false labor and killing, and his killings and the content of his brutality. And it says in verse 10, for thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee. For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. Okay. So right in here, it speaks of this violence. We're going into the violence that is done. She couldn't talk not only that they were murdered, but the cruelty and the way it was carried out. A boy was out fishing by the creek, and one of the bodies came up. And in the spring of 1921, Williams and Mannings faced an all-white jury, and both were found guilty in the town of Covington, Georgia. Clyde Manning, the foreman, and John Williams were given life sentences. Okay, so they were given life sentences. Okay. 10 years later, Both of them died in prison. Okay. John Williams was the first Southern white man since 1877 to be indicted for first-degree murder of a black man. It would not happen until 1966. That's a long damn time. Imagine the bodies that they accumulated between 1877 and 1966. You know, if they weren't, you wouldn't be convicted. Okay. It would not. Okay. The following year, an expose of peonage in Florida inflamed readers because the victim's 22-year-old Martin Talbert was white. He was picked up for vagrancy and sold to a lumber company. He died shortly after the hands of a brutal overseer. See, they did it to themselves too. So they're just giving an example. It did happen to one white person. Because, you know, when I saw this, first he was whipped. He whipped him on his bare back 40 times and whipped him another 40 times with a heavy leather strap. Imagine what they would do to blacks, though. Whew. 40 times with a heavy leather strap because Talbert laid on the ground after the first whipping. So he got whipped again because he laid on the ground. Talbot crawled to his feet and the guard began whipping him as he ran. Talbot finally made it back to the cabin and collapsed on his bed. After 150 lashings, he never stood up again. The outcry over Tabas Def helped put an end to the leasing of convicts in Florida. See, I guess when they saw that happened to a so-called Caucasian man, now they're going to go into action about it. When this has been happening for the longest, this is okay. In 1928, a similar case in Alabama led to the release of its last prisoners from the coal mines. In the coal mines, earlier in the early classes, they were, subject to drinking the dirty water that they'd be walking through in the coal mine. They were subject to being destroyed. I said when the coal would fall down on them, that's another hazard right there. They could die from that, and also they would die from the explosions because under all that coal is gases that was underneath that coal. So a lot of the prisoners died as well. Okay. Now let's see where we at. Now, Tabas Def helped put an end. Okay, but these changes. 800 happy Negroes. Okay, they said in Florida, shortly after 1928, a similar case in Alabama led to the release of its last prisoners in the coal mines. 800 happy Negroes sung out old time spirituals. They were singing old time spirituals like they did. Okay, on the last day in the mines. But these changes, mind you, had little impact. In 1930, roughly half of all blacks, 4.8 million people, still lived in the Black Belt region of the South. 4.8 million, still there. Ain't go nowhere. Couldn't go nowhere. Okay. The vast majority were trapped in some form of exploitative labor, arrangement. So they were still getting exploited. Their work was still getting exploited. Okay, in doing so, blacks who remained in the South in the 1920s, the 1930s, 1940s, that's not too long ago. These conditions that they face were often desperate, and they find themselves more and more vulnerable. They try to rise up and create some sort of protest against the conditions that they face. In the fall of 1932, the United States underwent a profound political change marked by the election of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, a distant cousin of Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, because Teddy Roosevelt was the one that started the investigation of peonage, and basically he really like failed when he did all of that. It didn't really change much back then. As much as Teddy was an advocate for blacks, FDR was 100% more of an advocate for blacks. Okay, so that's when you saw a lot of our people marching. They had signs that said 83 women were lynched since 1889. 83 women were lynched since 1889. They had these signs and they were marching and all that. The other sign read 5,068 lynchings. 5,068 lynchings. Okay. Also, it says crime conference should consider lynching. Blacks are becoming ever increasingly important part of the Democratic political coalition. Blacks are moving north, joining unions, joining the NAACP in unprecedented numbers. Okay. Blacks are getting involved in unions, members of churches. Blacks are publishing newspapers, magazines. All are finding ways to bring their influence to bear on the federal government to say, do your job. They're trying to get the government to do their job because the government started this. And the government was acting like they were going to help blacks, but that wasn't, that was, just grandstanding, their political grandstanding and all that. We're talking about constitutional rights here. Citizens are being abused here. Do your job and don't expect our support, or don't expect our support. They would say, do your job or else you're not going to get us to vote. The blacks were saying that. All right. So in 1941, and during World War II, at a president's meeting, he was asked, what would the Japanese use that will enable them to attack us and would be problematic? Someone said the treatment of Negroes. The treatment of the Negroes. They had a meeting and said, how's Japan gonna give us problems? Enable them to attack us, and what will be problematic? And someone said that the treatment of Negroes. Months earlier, the Department of Justice established a civil rights section, but its focus was on labor issues, not racial equality. Okay. See, that always has been the issue, the racial issue. It's always been that way. No matter how you sugarcoat it, no matter how we say that you love this person and love that, that's still gonna be the issue, because they're so insensitive to the plight of blacks and Hispanics in the world. Okay. I'm gonna go to Ezekiel 35. Ezekiel 35 and verse 5. Okay. Because Ezekiel chapter 35 and verse 5, because thou hast had a perpetual hatred, continuous hatred, man, and has shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword, because the sword don't only mean a sword, like this. A sword could be a gun. Okay, has shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity, in the time of their iniquity, that their iniquity had an end. Verse 6, therefore, as I live, saith the Lord, I will prepare thee unto blood, because, Salaki, I prepare thee unto blood, and blood shall pursue thee. Since thou hast not hated blood, even blood shall pursue thee. See? So he also said in verse 7, it also reads, thus I will make Mount Seir most desolate. Now, if you know Esau and you know this Bible, you know that the Edomites come from Mount Seir. Esau is Edom, and they dwelled in Mount Seir. It says in verse 7, I will make Mount Seir most desolate, and cut off from it that passeth out, and him that returneth. See, so this is what it goes into, And verse 8 says, and I will fill his mountains with slain men in thy hills and in thy valleys. See, the Most High ain't playing. The Most High is not playing about his children. He ain't playing about the children of Israel. We are God's chosen people, blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians. We always have been, understand? And this is what the Lord is going to take the revenge on our oppressor. The Lord is going to take revenge for the things that he's done. You understand? Their government is against us. Their system, the whole system is rigged against us. Systematic slavery. Okay. And I will fill the mountains with his slain men, and in thy hills and in thy valleys and in all thy rivers they shall fall that are slain by the sword. Verse 9, I will make thee perpetual desolations. Okay. And thy cities shall not return, and ye shall know that I am the Lord. See, the Lord ain't playing. You think that it's not going to happen? We're real close to it. We had these plagues coming down on us so bad. You got the COVID, you got the Delta variant, you got now it's attacking the kids. You got all these wildfires blazing. You got these people dying. 180 Europeans died in this flood just recently. Okay. The Lord is going to be taking vengeance in the earth, man, for our sake, for Israel's sake. Okay. And for things like this that I'm reading now, I'm reading parts of history. History is important. Let me see. I'm gonna go to Deuteronomy 32, and I believe verse 7. Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verse 7 reads, remember the days of old. That's why we read in the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. We read history, we study history, we apply it to the scriptures. As long as it complements the scriptures, makes things true. So this is what we are to do. Verse 7 says, remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee, thy elders, and they will tell thee. Verse 8, when the Most High divided the nations, their inheritance. So when the Most High divided to the nations, their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the numbers, of the children of Israel. See, the Lord did that. He separated the nations, divided the nations. Should we separate? That's what the topic of this class is. Should blacks and Hispanics separate from America? I don't mean leave America. We don't mean leave America in the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. We mean separate your mind from America. Get out of those political parties and waiting for something to happen for them, for us, for our sake. We've been waiting forever. We've been waiting for Obama. We thought we had hope when we had this President Obama, but Obama just recently endorsed and is building up with millions of dollars a African basketball team. Well, what happened to the so-called African American? What's he doing for us? He's really never done anything for us. We voted for him, and we voted for an African because Obama is an African. His father's from Kenya. You are who your father is according to the Bible. His father's from Kenya. So he's from Kenya. So he's not a homeboy. He ain't one of the homeboys. He ain't your fam. He ain't your kinfolk. He's already starting a basketball team in Africa. He's showing out now. He's showing where his heart is, where his love is. And that's fine, because that's who he is. He's a Hamite, according to the Bible. He's from Ham. Well, we blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans here, we're Shemites. We're from the seed of Shem. We're from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We are the chosen of God, the Israelites, the true Israelites of the earth. Okay. This is why God is going to have vengeance for us, man, because we haven't been given raw deals throughout history. That's why you ought to remember the days of old. That's why you should remember slavery. They keep telling you in school it was a choice, or they tell you in the laundromat or in the club, forget slavery. They tell you, everywhere you go, forget slavery. La'al, which means no in Hebrew. You should never, ever forget slavery or forget this other form of slavery, peonage, forced labor, leasing convicts, trumping up charges, taking them from misdemeanors to felonies, ridiculous crimes that get you in bondage, forced labor to help somebody else's farm, to build up somebody else's farm, sharecropping, because everybody knows that even when you was a sharecropper, you're not making no revenue, you're not making ends meet. You're not going to even own the land that you sharecropping on. They say sharecropping, that's a big title. It didn't live up to what it is, because our oppressor is a liar. Not only is he a murderer, he's a liar, man. All right. Okay. I'm going to go to John chapter 8 and verse 44. Wait. This is what it reads, and this is Christ speaking, Yahushua in the Hebrew. Christ said this in chapter 8, verse 44. Ye are of your father, the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. Okay, they've been doing this since slavery, since they took us off them slave ships. Understand? He was a murderer from the beginning. Now, this is Christ saying this. He was a murderer from the beginning, had the spirit of Cain. Our oppressor has the spirit of Cain in him. He can't help but to have blood on his hands. Okay? And abode not in the truth. Abode means to live in the truth. He didn't live in the truth. Abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. There's no truth in our oppressor. Where's the truth when he had the treaties with our so-called Native Indian brothers, the Native Indians during the Trail of Tears, or any part of history where he had the treaties when he sat down with the kings of the tribes of Gad, the tribes of the so-called Native Indians? He broke every single treaty that he made. That's why they say our oppressor speaks with a forked tongue. The white man speaks with a forked tongue. He's a liar, man. Okay. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. He's the father of lies. This is what Christ said. And this is what has happened. He has proven himself to be a liar. Don't believe me now? I want you to go to the Republicans and Democrats, Donald Trump, Biden, all of them, every single last president. Politics, lies. Okay. So now the president asked his attorney general, this unit might be used to demonstrate a commitment to racial change and what stands in the crossroads, labor rights and black rights, peonage. That's what stands in the crossroad, and involuntary servitude. Involuntary servitude. That's when you serving somebody and it's against your will. You're being forced to serve them. It's involuntary servitude. Okay. They can't just attack segregation head on during World War II because they still need the white Southerners who are part of the Democratic coalition. But they did sincerely believe that these peonage cases were really bad and required a response. In the decade of the Pace trial, the federal government paid little attention to the complaints of forced labor sent to the White House, the Department of Justice, and the NAACP. Nearly 80 years passed since the United States ratified the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. Now, in December of 1941, the president finally took steps to enforce it, just 5 days after Pearl Harbor. Roosevelt's Attorney General issued a circular number 3591, it said that the federal attorneys were to aggressively prosecute any case of involuntary servitude or slavery, not only those defined as peonage. He said whether they were being held there with the threat of imprisonment or out of violence or whatever mechanism being used to keep blacks in slavery, you should go after it. Okay. He said that this is part of the war effort. These cases are important because blacks need to feel their rights. Their rights are being taken care of. See, now they're trying to save face, like they say. They were trying to save face when they did that. Okay. Within months, there was a prosecution underway of a Texas man who had been holding a Negro for a slave for 15 years. He was convicted by a federal jury in 1942. That's not too long ago. Okay. The narrator marks that as a technical end of slavery. The narrator was saying that in the movie. Okay. He marked that as the end to technical slavery when he went to a federal prison. The records are incomplete, but it's estimated that 80 years following the Civil War, as many as 800,000 blacks, get that number, 800,000 blacks had faced the South's corrupt system of justice. A huge number of those arrested were forced into involuntary servitude. Some, including Viola Cosley's son, Marion, found freedom in January 7th in 1943. He enlisted into the Army, one of more than 2.5 million blacks who enlisted during World War II. 2.5 million blacks enlisted for this country. Even after all of this, all of these horrific acts, all of this involuntary servitude, all of this meager health care, being hungry and thirsty, having no shelter, they still went into the military, 2.5 million, okay? Were enlisted in World War II. Green Cottingham, arrested in 1908, might have served in the First World War, but by the Second World War, he would have been in his 50s. But Green never made it out of the Birmingham prison units. We don't know the details of the life he led in the stockade or underground, but he survived 5 months before he got sick. He went to see the doctor and never went back to the mine. See, that's all due to his suffering, all due to his suffering. More than 9,000 prisoners known to have died while being leased to industry by southern states and counties. His body was dumped somewhere in the fields outside of the mine. You know, and this movie goes into his descendant, one of our sisters. She goes along and she's looking next to the mines of where he might have been buried, because she don't know where he was buried. You know, we're under a terrible demonic oppressor, man. Demonic, bloodthirsty, understand? Sickening, just sickening, horrible. He's putting all these bounds of labor on us. He's falsely accusing us. He's out there whipping us, beating us half to death within inches of our lives, not giving us proper health care, not feeding us, all these things, okay? And all these things, by the way, are a result of blacks and Hispanics, our ancestors, and what we've done to get away from doing the law, statutes, and commandments. We're supposed to be practicing the law, statutes, and commandments. Okay. Now, this is what it says in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28 and verse 48. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies. You will serve your enemies. See, this is part of the curses of Deuteronomy of the children of Israel. That's how we know we the children of Israel. This is one of the avenues that shows us we're the children of Israel, amongst many, many other facts, historical facts, and other scriptures in the Bible. Okay, so I'm at verse 48. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things. You're going to serve him hungry. You're going to serve him naked. You're going to serve him thirsty and in want of all things. You're still doing that. You're doing that in the ghettos and the barrios and in the reservations today, these days. You understand? You know, we haven't had, you know, any form of, they call it equality. We haven't had any recognition as any resolve for our burdens, for our conditions in the ghetto. Obama didn't, like I said, Obama didn't do a damn thing. You understand? NAACP and did not. We don't really have no righteous leaders. Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians don't have righteous leaders. But right now, you're tuned into the righteous leaders, a representative of the righteous leaders, the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge under the Commanding General Yohana. We're leading our nation. We're bringing our nation out of this, this bondage, out of being oppressed. We're giving our people their customs and their cultures back. You understand? We're letting you know that you are the Hebrews in the Bible. You are the Hebrew Israelites of the Bible. Therefore, thou shalt serve thy enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things. And he, pay attention, he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck. You ever saw the movie Roots? What did Kunta Kinte have around his neck when they took him off the slave ship? Okay. What did the slave have? Yoke of iron around his neck, shackled down by his feet as well. Until he hath destroyed thee. See? And verse 49 reads, the Lord shall bring a nation against thee. He's going to bring a whole nation against the children of Israel from afar, from the end of the earth, because we weren't. Israel is our homeland. This is America, the end of the earth. As swift as the eagle flieth. There's that eagle again, symbolic of America. You understand? The Bible is written in symbols. Sometimes it's written literal, sometimes it's written in symbols. As swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. Which tells us we did speak another language. We know we did. We were taught English. We spoke another language, and that language was Hebrew. Yahweh B'Shem Yahweh Shai Barak Thah. Yahweh Shema Thah B'Shem Yahweh Shai. We spoke that language, Hebrew. Okay? Now, 800,000 blacks had faced the South's corrupt system of justice. A huge number of those arrested were forced into involuntary servitude, including Viola Costley's son in the army. Okay, we went over that. Okay, we're talking about Green Cottonham. He led the Stockade Underground, but he survived 5 months before he got sick. He went to see the doctor and never went back to the mines. 13 days later, Green died. He is among more than 9,000 prisoners known to have died while being leased to industry by southern states and counties. His body was dumped somewhere in the field outside the mines. You can't imagine the impact of having a relative here and then suddenly coming up missing or killed. Hundreds of other prisoners lie buried there as well. What's fascinating about Green Cottonham is that he's not special. He's not special. That's fascinating. Well, no, known or popular, but that's part of the beauty because he is representative of all these names, faceless people who disappeared during this time frame, who are deemed to being of no value. You see? And then you realize the value isn't important. We all have lives, stories, interesting stories worth telling. At the end of the Civil War, there were 4 million freed slaves who lived in absolute poverty. Absolute poverty. You know, just like it was what we read in Deuteronomy 28 and 48. And you shall serve your enemies in hunger, thirst, and in want of all things. Okay. At the end of the Civil War, okay, we heard that. Uneducated, they were also living in absolute poverty, but they were also uneducated, lacked access to opportunity, Okay, we didn't have no opportunities, man. There were just as many whites who fit this category as well. A lot of people don't know that. But see, after World War II, the kick to that was those poor whites, they became the middle class. They were raised to the middle class. They went into the cities and they had things that they owned. Where was yours, black man? Where was yours, Hispanic man? Where was yours, so-called Native Indian man? Where was your middle class status? Okay. Over the next 75 years, American society performed a miracle. Those 4 million whites who were impoverished, in poverty, poor, became 40 million middle-class Americans. So they were no longer in poverty. Okay. Middle-class Americans by the beginning of World War II. That's what made American society the extraordinary superpower. See, along with the industry, the agriculture in Alabama. I'm trying to get to then what they actually called it, the agriculture, you know, all these conditions. It's, 40 years after the Civil War, the United States emerged as a global economic leader due to, in part, by the Southern industry and agriculture. See, that's how we became a superpower, off of our backs. That's how they became a superpower, off of our backs. You understand? Employers throughout the South relied upon debt-coerced labor. Coerced means you're forced, or forced debt-forced labor. Okay? The judge's ruling might not just apply to convicts or those trapped by corruption, but also to hundreds of thousands of black families tied to white land owners whose tenant farming and sharecropping. See, if they lose access to these workers, I'll show you how valuable they are. If they lose access to these workers or are compelled to deal equitably with them, equally with them, like free citizens, the entire Southern economy and United States economy would be disrupted. That's how heavy that was. That's how heavy we were. That's how great a people we are, workers, but that's how forced we were into working against our will. They were making money hand over fist. You understand? So that's what it was actually called. I mean, that's what it was actually. Yeah, that's what it was called actually. Okay. Became a very, very rich nation, a superpower through forced labor. After slavery, that was the other slavery. Okay. By the beginning of World War II, what made American society the extraordinary superpower that it is today, all of that was done in a way that excluded blacks and brutalized blacks at the same time. Man, for thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee. It's going to be shameful for our oppressor in the near future. 2 ticks away from it. We included how they brutalized blacks at the same time. When you see how blacks' lives were truly stolen from them, their freedom taken away, their fathers and husbands and brothers taken away, you can understand how the difficulties and disparities would exist for much longer than it seems they should have. You understand? So you could see how, this didn't just last during that time, it lasted after that time. Because the psychologists will tell you that trauma is generational. The trauma is generational. That's why blacks act the way they do today. You understand? Hispanics act the way they do today. Native Indians act the way they do today because of trauma, because of suffering, because of inequality, because being forced to do things against their will, like labor, okay? Being whipped 160 times with a 10-prong whip, okay? That's why, no one has compassion on our people. No one. What ISUPK does under the Commander General Yohana. That's why we're here to teach these classes and get out in the camps on the weekends and speak out to our people and reach out to our people and speak of the discrepancy, the horrific nature of what we live under, how our oppressors just violently kill us, like Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Eric Garner, Akai Gurley, Stan Philando Castile, Sandra Bland. There's a few examples of those conditions. There's always been a problem between us and the police department. The police department's origin is slave catchers. They were the original slave catchers. That's what the police department's function was back in the times of slavery. They were slave catchers. Okay, you run across it, you escape from the plantation, the police department come and get you. Now they out of control. They are out of control. Who's that? George Floyd. They're out of control, lynching us right there in the street. Okay. Without appreciation of this history, you descend into fantasies that Black people don't deserve equal rights, because Black people constitutionally, intellectually, morally are not the equals of whites, period. Okay. And that's one of the other things that they think about. We have to recognize within these awful, ghastly tales of the brutalization of Blacks in this country that the motivation for that was profit. The motivation was profit, from the small landowners to the big corporations. It was profit. It's about money. Understand? Money that we don't see as a people, but they were getting the money. These small landowners and these big corporations were getting the money. You understand? Let me go to I'm gonna go to Psalms 55 and 21. Psalms chapter 55 and verse 21. The words of his mouth was smoother than butter. So he's gonna come to you acting like everything is okay and good. Because remember, he's the father of lies. He's the father of lies, as is described in John chapter 8 and verse 44. Okay. So his words, as in here, the words of his mouth were smoother than butter, you know, but war was in his heart. War was in his heart. It really was in his mind, because heart means mind. War was in his mind. He's thinking about being at war with you. You understand? His words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. They were drawn swords. You know, he talked to you softer than oil, but he got this for you. He got this for you, drawn swords. Understand? That's what he has for you. Okay? As written in the book of Psalms. Okay? So, you know, we need to understand what's going on here. We need to understand how we've been taken advantage of. You know, we need to definitely see what was going down. Okay. Let's look into the book of Lamentations, chapter 4 and verse 18. They hunt, this is Lamentations chapter 4 and 18. They hunt our steps. They were hunting us. They were hunting us, man. This man walking on the side on the road going back to his farm that he bought. He's a Negro going back, and his oppressor comes out and say, "You owe me." He said, "I don't owe you nothing." He said, "Oh no, you owe me. Come on with me." You understand? And then he sold him to, I believe, to Pace. He sold him to a man named Pace. And that's what it is. They hunt our steps. He's hunting us. He's hunting him down. They were hunting down George Floyd. They were hunting down Philando Castile. They were hunting down Breonna Taylor. Understand? They hunt our steps that we cannot go in our streets. Okay? Our end is near. Our days are fulfilled, for our end is come. Verse 19, our persecutors, oppressors, are swifter than the eagles of the heaven. It says our persecutors are swifter than the eagles of heaven. They pursued us upon the mountains. They laid wait for us in the wilderness. See, they pursued us everywhere, in the mountains, in the wilderness. They hunted our steps, man. We can't go in the streets. The streets are not safe. If you black, you believe you black and you driving your car, you're going to get pulled over. The cop going to take you out, search your car, put you on the ground, and quite possibly murder you. If you make the wrong move, he's looking for a reason why. You understand? Whether you have a gun or not, usually and oftentimes they didn't have guns on them. They were killed, shot in the back 3 times, shot 16 times. You know, put a knee on his neck till they suffocated him to death. You understand? Hold him in a chokehold till he choked to death. You understand? This is our persecutor. They hunt our steps, man. You know, that's abominable, and that's so violent, man, and that's so heartless and cruel, brutalizing, horrific acts of violence, man. Even their own descendants said that when she heard the stories of her fathers talking about how they would treat the forced convicts, the convicts who are working underneath them. You understand? We have to recognize within these awful, ghastly tales of brutalization of blacks, in this country, that the motivation for that was profit, from the small owners to the big corporations. That part of this country's legacy at the end of the day is still with us. You understand? When I think about Green Cottonham and what he went through, I think about a quote. The arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. Even though Green Cottonham didn't get justice in his day, and so many thousands of people didn't get theirs as well, maybe now, with the telling of this reality and this history, these individuals can receive some measure of justice. See, that's a quote from one of the descendants of Green Cottonham. You understand? Maybe they can get it, through the tellings of these stories. But the true justice, what they don't know, is that the true justice is coming from the Lord. The true vengeance and the true justice, and for our oppressor to be put into his place. The Most High God, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, which is Christ, will take that justice. When Christ returns, our oppressors are going to really receive the justice that they do. They're going to get their due, their just deserts. They're going to get their due, their day in court. We're going to have our day in court. They're going to be judged in the Most High's court, and the Most High is going to slay them by the end of the sword. Christ is coming with a sword. Okay. The Christian church lies to you and tells you that, you can get that Christ is coming back and everything is going to be good and well. But Christ is going to be angry. The Lord is angry for you messing with his children, just like a father gets angry if he finds out that his son has been taken advantage of. You understand? Christ is not playing. We're going to go to Matthew chapter 10 and verse 34. Okay. Matthew chapter 10 and verse 34. Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. That's what Christ said. Christ is not coming to bring peace on earth. He's coming to bring with a sword to earth. You understand? Because of the children of Israel were forced by the end of the sword, killed by the edge of the sword. Christ is coming back with that sword, man. Believe that. When he comes back, it's going to bring war with him. He's going to have the million black angels crack that sky and come down here and take vengeance upon the children of Israel, vengeance upon the blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians. That's what the Most High God wants. And that's what Christ is going to do, the duty of his Father, and come down here and rule this earth with righteous government after these corrupt governments go under the ground and be destroyed. You understand? Carrie Kinsey, 1903, wrote a letter. A letter went unanswered. It's possible that her brother was freed as the word of peonage investigation spread. Her cousin, Bernard Kinsey, is a business leader, philanthropist, and art collector in California. His grandfather moved his family from Georgia to Florida around 1900 and later established a chain of grocery stores. Green Cottonham's cousin, Barbara Jean Bilal, is a university librarian in Alabama. Her niece, Tanya Grooms, is a chemical engineer in Georgia. Henry Malone's niece, Sharon Malone, is a Washington, D.C. physician and wife of the U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder. In 1963, her sister Vivian Malone Jones was one of 2 Blacks who integrated into the University of Alabama. Ezekiel Archie, who was one of the forced laborers, he has no prison death record, suggesting that he survived the coal mines. See, these things happen. These things, people, families that move forward were suffering, man, are still suffering those evil acts that happened to their ancestors, that happened to our ancestors, all of our ancestors, all of us who have lineage from slavery. You understand? And still suffering from these things, man. There is a perpetual hatred, man, for our people. Let me go to Isaiah chapter 14, verse 21. Isaiah 14 and verse 21. It reads, prepare slaughter for the children, Salaki, for his children, our oppressor, for the iniquity of their fathers. Prepare slaughter. That's why Christ is coming with this, to get the descendants of our oppressors who live deliciously in this place we call America, off the backs of Blacks, poor Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians, off our backs, man. For the iniquity of their fathers, that they do not rise, nor possess the land, nor fill the world with cities. Verse 22, for I will rise up against them, saith the Lord of hosts. Hosts are armies, the Lord of armies, man. The Most High God, saith the Lord of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name and remnant and son and nephew, saith the Lord. That's what the Lord is going to do for us. Understand it? Do what we can't do. That's why Christ is called the Savior. Christ is our Savior. Understand? He's the Savior because our nation needs to be saved. Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians need to be saved so bad. It's not the same saved that you see and hear about in church when somebody say that they saved. Christ has not returned yet, so there's no way possibly that you could be saved. Your pastor told you a lie. We need a Savior, and we need him now. We need him soon. You understand? But these horrific acts, man, it's crazy. It's crazy. We talk about heroes of history like Woodrow Wilson, the president, like he was a hero. Well, let me tell you something about Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson reintroduced the Jim Crow laws to America. He reintroduced them. He didn't like blacks either, and he was very racist. Okay. Woodrow Wilson in 1913, Trotter wrote him, and Woodrow said he would give blacks a fair deal. However, when he takes office, he appoints 5 Southerners who segregates blacks and white workers. He had it in the office. They were working together before he got to that government office. And then when he got in, he separated the blacks and whites in the office. Okay. So, we see a lot of things and we think these people are heroes, but these people are actually monsters, man. Straight up monsters. Just like who was that? J. Edgar Hoover, that FBI, the leader of the FBI, a monster. They give you the outer appearance that they're giving somebody some type of fair deal or some type of justice, but really on the inside, they're oppressing you. You're being oppressed. Understand? Let me hit I'm gonna hit let's see, I'm gonna hit Job 9:24, the book of Job, chapter 9 and verse 24. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. See, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. Our oppressor has the power over the earth. America is a superpower, is it not? Yes, it is. Okay. The earth is given to the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges. Understand? You look into a book of the Russian icons called The Russian Icons, and you'll see Michelangelo, I believe, one of the artists, taking a picture and putting white paint in the pictures of the prophets of the Bible, putting white paint on their faces because their faces originally looked like mine and darker. Okay. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? Because they knew they were going to defend them and hide and make a big lie and say that they weren't the ones doing that. They don't do evil. They can do no wrong. But if not, who and where and who is he? Who and where is he? We know we're being exploited. We know that there's no equality and fair deal when it comes among us. He knows that. Okay. Let's see. That one should be just around. Okay, so the press called abject slavery. Reese found a totally corrupt system. John Pace, Fletcher, Turner, and George Cosby, all of them wealthy farm owners, were the ringleaders. All of them had a justice of the peace. They all had a justice of the peace. Okay, these are the ones that were giving forced labor to blacks and doing it involuntary, practicing involuntary servitude. Okay, all of them were the ringleaders. They all had a justice of the peace. Pace had a man named James Kennedy, his brother-in-law. If they wanted a man convicted, they would get their justice of the peace or each other's justice of the peace and declare a Negro guilty. After Davis worked 10 months, they told him to continue to work. Davis said no. They told him if he didn't, they would put him in the river and weigh him down with chains. See, that's one of their techniques. Davis was locked up for 3 days prior to being told that they were going to throw him in the river. Pace was charged with several counts of peonage, and if convicted, he would face decades in prison. All right. He faced decades of prison if he was convicted. But really, that wasn't the case. He wasn't going to do that. They didn't do that to him. You understand? All right. The next day, Pace's justice of the peace unexpectedly returned to court. This dude, James Kennedy, right? Because see, this was the time they started investigating all these claims of peonage and involuntary servitude, right? Forced labor. He felt like he was also going to be sent to prison. See, They had sent Pace to prison for giving Davis to be sent for prison for giving Davis and other Negroes false trumped up charges in order to place them in servitude, peonage, for false debt. Kennedy confirmed that 80 or 90 cases were presented to him. The federal government suspected many more. When Judge Jones ruled the case, it unleashed a firestorm throughout the South, not just Alabama, that caused panic and fear for 40 years after the Civil War. See, so these things happen, you know. Employers throughout the South relied on debt, coerced labor. The judge's ruling might not just apply to convicts or those trapped by corruption, but also hundreds of thousands of black families tied to white landowners. I read that already. If they lose access to these workers or are compelled to deal inequitably with them, they would, you know, lose the entire I say agricultural, political. It would be a political catastrophe. See, it was going to be a political catastrophe. The entire Southern economy and U.S. economy would be disrupted. What began as a principle in the investigation would probably go nowhere. That would have probably went nowhere. That began something that probably would have never went nowhere. Had turned into political catastrophe. Political catastrophe. This sparked a flood of letters addressed to the president. At the National Archives today, there's more than 30,000 letters that are documented by arrests, the subjugation, punishment, the mistreatment, and the profits that was made of forced labor of armies and armies of black people. Okay. Bernard Kinsey, a descendant of Carrie Kinsey, who wrote the letter, one of over 30,000 different letters. Hers was for the freedom of her brother. The letters strongly indicate that blacks were asking and hoping that the government would protect them from the new slavery after the original slavery. See, that's why this was another slavery, man. Our people been through so much, man. It's not any wonder that Christ is going to return with the sword, man. The Cosbys, Fletcher, and Turner pleaded guilty, and they were given minimum sentences. Pace was sentenced to prison. He remained free on appeal as his lawyers prepared an outrageous argument. They said Pace wasn't guilty. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the scripture. This is Zechariah chapter 11 and verse 5. It reads, whose possessors slay them, which means kill them, and hold themselves not guilty. His possessors slay them. They slayed a lot of these blacks and hold themselves not guilty. Okay. They that sell them say, blessed be the Lord, for I am rich, and their own shepherds pity them not. Our own leaders don't give us no pity on all this. Where are all these so-called black leaders right now? You're seeing more crime on the news against blacks, more violence against blacks and Hispanics, man. Where are our shepherds? Which a shepherd, he protects the flock. Shepherd protects the cattle, protects the cows, the lambs, you know, protects the flocks. Where are they? They pity us not, man. We get no pity from them. Only during election time, you know, you see a little bit. But imagine all the more cases that already have occurred, all the incidents that many other incidents that been unanswered, that nobody really paid attention to, that nobody, you know, put the spotlight on. They'd use one or two for political gain. There's many more incidents that's been happening to our people that goes undocumented, that goes unanswered. You know, this is what happens. Hold yourselves not guilty. Kill us and hold yourself not guilty. Why you think they had the LA riots? You know, for what happened to Rodney King. Okay. That's why we rioted. Pace wasn't guilty of, this is Pace's lawyer saying this, Pace wasn't guilty of peonage. He wasn't guilty of the involuntary servitude because his laborers did not owe him money. But you came on and took them as prisoners and told them that they owed you money, but you didn't owe them money. So that's what his lawyers are saying. It's an outrageous argument in court because his laborers did not owe him money. And while he might have been guilty of slavery in 1903, that was not a crime. That wasn't even a crime. Okay. Although the 13th Amendment was put into effect, there was no statute passed to make you guilty of slavery by holding someone in slavery after the Civil War. 3 months after the trial in 1903, President Roosevelt granted a pardon to the Cosbys. They got a pardon, okay? 3 years later in 1906, he also pardoned J.W. Pace. Pace never went to prison, and the government turned a blind eye to the forced laborers he continued to hold on his farm. The government took a blind eye to the forced laborers that he had on his farm, that he continued to have on his farm, and he never went to prison. And the other ones he was given a pardon, and so was his other cohorts given a pardon. The federal government didn't want to do the necessary work to uproot all the peonage occurring under the corrupt system. Henry Malone had to serve a year and a day when he turned himself in. A year and a day. 1908, Green Cottingham was to suffer the horrors of peonage. Every southern state passed laws to stop blacks from progressing. Green was a victim of this. Jobs were kept from Negroes, and they were kept from moving freely throughout the southern states. You know, Green was arrested with others outside a train station in Columbia, Alabama. Within 24 hours, he was convicted of vagrancy. That's why vagrancy was one of the worst laws that they passed. He was convicted of vagrancy and sentenced to 3 months hard labor and a $38 fine to pay the fine. Because he was unable to pay the $38 fine, they added 3 more months to his sentence. Okay. Sent to the Pratt mines, which paid the county $12 a month for him. Tanya Grooms, his descendant, said, just because he's a convict doesn't mean treating him like an animal. Barbara Bilal, the descendant of Green Cottingham, said she didn't know people could just get picked up and put in jail and that they could get lost in the system. There's a lot of brothers lost in the system today. A lot of our brothers and sisters lost in this system. Every time, there's a lot of times you turn around oftentimes and hear of a person being unjustly convicted and then set free after decades of serving a prison sentence. My uncle was one of them. He served at least 45 years, something like that, for a crime that he didn't commit. And finally, they let him free when he's an old, gray-haired senior citizen, super senior citizen. All his life then wasted away behind bars over something that he didn't do. You see, these are the reasons why Christ is angry. Christ is coming back. His eyes are going to be red. He's coming back with an army to take care of this, because we can't on our own. We just go on and on being victims of this brutal, corrupt system, that just squeezes every ounce of life out of us for their gain. Being whipped with a 10-prong whip 160 times. Man, imagine that. Long leather straps being whipped. One of these these farm owners that had the involuntary servitude that was practicing it said that it's better for a Southern man who knows how to deal with the Negroes to raise these crops and have these crops, sold and everything, and all this labor. He said it should be a Southern man who knows how to work with Negroes. And a lot of them were former slave owners. They came and worked for this guy, and he became rich under the labor and the force of the sword. You understand? Now we can look at this. They could be buried in some grave somewhere and the family still looking for them. I didn't know the sheriff's department could sell free black people to the corporation. Sell free black people to the corporation. Steel plants and coal mines. It wasn't in the history books. We didn't know. 30 years passed, but except for the electric lights, Ezekiel Archie would have easily recognized the conditions. Green Cottingham now faced above ground, though Birmingham was becoming the region's largest industrial center. Birmingham, Alabama. The mine that leased Green's labor was now owned by Northern-based U.S. Steel. Okay, the largest corporation in the world, man. See, this stuff wasn't done. These things weren't done on a small scale. These weren't practiced for small profit. These were practiced for large profit. U.S. Steel. Some people know about U.S. Steel, heard of U.S. Steel. And that comes from the coal mines. The coal mines. Okay. But that's what you use. You use that to make steel. Coal, limestone, and iron ore. That makes steel. So this is how they made it. They basically made it the region's largest industrial center. The Northern-based U.S. Steel is the largest corporation in the world. With growing numbers of Negroes, nearly 2 million in 1910 and 1930 were moving out of the South due to the threat of being lynched, pulled off the street, having to work, having to be on your P's and Q's so that you don't offend anyone, being thrown in jail also. So they were tired of it. Our people were tired of it and tried to get out. So they moved during the 1910 and 1930. They moved out of the South. A lot still remained though. They couldn't get out of the South. You understand? They just couldn't leave. It's incredible, man. It's just incredible to imagine all of these unjust practices were going on. They don't teach you this. Is this, by the way, has this been taught in high school? Has this been taught in elementary school? Has this been taught in middle school? No. We just go on and act like nothing is wrong. That's the problem with our people. We have to stand up. We have to unite together. You understand? I'm going to go to The book of Zephaniah, chapter 2 and verse 1. You know, we are not to be separated. We got to stop separating ourselves. You understand? Stop separating yourself. It says in the book of Zephaniah, chapter 2 and verse 1, gather yourselves together. Yea, gather together, O nation, not desired. We're a nation that's not desired. Who desires us? Who desires blacks? Who desires Hispanics? Nobody. We are to gather ourselves among ourselves. Because the Lord said this about us. I'm going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verse 6. The Lord said this about us. For thou art a holy people. Let's take a little time about that. What does holy mean? Let's take a little time off and try to understand, what does holy mean? Well, don't get the answer in the Christian church, because you're going to get the wrong answer. You're going to get the utmost wrong answer. Holy means separate. Holy means to separate. If you have something that's holy, say this cell phone was holy, would I put it among the common things like this knife holder and this book and this other book? Would I put it with that, what the Lord gave me? No. I would separate it and take care of it, because the Most High God gave it to me. Understand? I would take care of it. Just like the birthright that the Lord gave that was supposed to go to Esau. But instead, Jacob got the birthright, because Esau despised the birthright and sold it for some red soup. Understand? Jacob valued that. So did Jacob's mother. They valued the birthright. It was valuable to them. This came from the Most High God, Yahweh. That's how they saw it. We're going to take care of this. We're going to put it in its own special place. We're going to do with it what the Lord wants us to do with it. Why you think he gave it to us? But Esau hated his birthright. So we as a people are a separate people. The Lord said to separate. Should blacks and Hispanics separate from America? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Understand? We are to separate. Because it says here, read it over again. For thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people. And that'll tell you, if you're above all people, you're not mixed in with the people. You're separate from the people. Holy means to be separate, period, point blank. You ought to separate from these nations, man. Get your heart and mind out of America. And in the book of Zephaniah, gather yourself together with your brothers and sisters. Understand? Start working things out on your own. Stop being dependent upon. Become independent. Become holy. The Lord commands it. Okay? And it's high time we should do it. Martin Luther King sold us down the river. He sent us, like he said on his deathbed, I can't help to think that I sent my people into a burning house. He said that on his deathbed because he thought that it's good to drink from the white fountain versus the black fountain. Eat at the white restaurant versus the black restaurant. To this day, we would have had thousands upon thousands of black restaurants, black churches, black businesses, black banks. Understand? Black hospitals with black doctors caring for black kids and Hispanic kids and Native Indian kids, if you get the gist of what I'm saying here and what we represent in the Israelite School of Universal and Practical Knowledge. We're to gather ourselves together, man. Do this once again. It is urgent that we should do so. We should separate our minds from America. We ain't got to go nowhere. We stay in America, but keep your mind out of America. Get your mind and heart to your brother and sister. Start doing good to your brother and sister. Start helping and supporting your brothers and sisters. Like they say, support black businesses, of course. Make more black businesses. Sisters, we can't wait for our sisters to start building nail shops. You know, start owning nail shops again. Start owning restaurants again. We don't need to assimilate into this society. You know, this is their society. Get your head out of politics. You don't need to vote. Vote for who? That's our oppressor's business. That's not your business if you're Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian. Who cares if you're a Democrat or a goddamn Republican? All right? You don't need to be so. You need to be an Israelite like you are. You need to act like an Israelite and start keeping these laws, statutes, and commandments, following the Lord, keeping the dietary laws, not eating shrimp, crab, and lobster, not celebrating all these holidays. Be a separate and holy people, because this is going to be the wisdom amongst the nations. This shows your wisdom amongst the nations that you follow these laws, statutes, and commandments, because they will say, surely thou art a wise people by doing so. Well, that's what we do here in the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge under the Commanding General Yohanan. We do these things because we know that it's necessary. It's biblical. We must do these things, or we'll be destroyed along with our oppressor. You want to be destroyed with your oppressor? You want to be destroyed with the man that lynched your ancestors? You want to be in a society with a man that lynched and killed and raped and molested and stole from you and your ancestors? Not me. I want to be in under a government and in a nation that has righteous rulership. And that can only come by our King, Christ, Yahushua in the Hebrew. He's going to bring that righteous government to America. He's going to make sure that we stay separated. Not only shall we be separated, he's going to make sure that we stay separated from these heathen nations, man, who are out to kill us. They don't want no earthly good to come to you. They don't want no profits to come to you. They don't want you owning any kind of land. They don't want you having any kind of stocks and bonds. Where's your stocks and bonds at? Where's your securities? You know, where's your son's trust funds? You don't have that. And if you have a piece of a small, minute portion of that. If you have that at all. I bet you they have it, though. I bet you that down to a dozen, they have these things, and in quantities, and in many in large quantities. Okay, they may have that in large quantities. They do have it. Okay, they're not worried about their retirements. They're taking trips out of the nation. They're taking trips across the world. You still sitting in the ghetto. You still working your 9 to 5. You still paying rent and live in tenements. You understand? That's because he guzzled up and ate up all the things that belong to you. Alabama became the #1 agricultural industry in the world. Man, that is incredible. That's fascinating. It's fascinating because we don't have an amount of it. We don't have a portion of what we worked for, that we were forced to work for, that we were killed to work for, killed and forced. Understand? We don't have that. We don't have, like they say, a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out. We don't have that. You understand? We're supposed to. That's the American dream, isn't it? Everybody's chasing this American dream. It's false. Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. That was false. Understand? We are not to listen to pastors who lie, saying they had dreams. There is no dreams when it comes to our people. That's why it's time to separate, separate from this nation. Gather yourselves together. Remember these scriptures and go and review them. Go back and read them and keep in your mind. Stay in these classes, and I'll see you. And with that, say shalom.